posted on C.A.R.org. If you want to use any of these slides, my slides are your slides, please feel free to post. You can put your picture in the corner, whatever you want to do, because this is all C.A.R. stuff. Just because Albert was one of our leading Rebs employees and told everybody about forums, I did just want to make you aware that if you do use the mobile form on your iPad, that you will now have the capability to sign you can sign it with your finger or with the stylus. So if you need more information on that, you can go to our website. And here's all the things I'm going to be covering today. I'm going to talk about the national and state economy, but most of my time is going to be spent talking about the housing market. And then, really about a third of my comments are going to be looking at results of our buyer and seller surveys so that I can give you some hints and tips and ideas on how to improve your game, if you will, out in the field, because honestly there isn't much any one of us can do about the economy. It's so much bigger than any one person. Understanding it is absolutely critical, but there are so many things that you can do regardless of market conditions to connect with buyers and sellers and have a fabulous experience with them. So anyway, let me get started with just a kind of, again, a very gross overview, and I'm happy to take questions afterwards if there are things you want to get into more in more depth. And as you look at economic growth, here's GDP, you can see that 2011 was a bit of a slowdown from 2010, and that wasn't a surprise. The way I kind of visualize it in my head is we had a relay race where the responsibility for stimulus was passed from the government to the private sector. And if you remember 2010, we had a continuation of the federal homebuyer tax credits, we had state homebuyer tax credits, you still had the TARP money kind of barreling through the economy. So no surprise that we pulled back from a 2.8% growth rate in 2010 to a 1.8% growth rate in 2011. The good news is that we are, I think, beginning to tread water on our own, if you will, particularly in the housing market. And I think in 2012, our forecast, and this is really in line with the consensus forecast, we'll see about a 2.6% GDP growth rate. Is it enough? No. If you look at where we were in 2011 compared to what a reasonable, sustainable, strong, kind of economy looks like, we need to see GDP growth over 3%. We certainly weren't there in 2011. We won't be there in 2012, but we're moving in that direction. We'd like to see the unemployment rate about 6%. We've had some good news on that front lately, but for the year as a whole, we had 9% last year, so still a significant gap. Job growth came in last year at about 1% for the year as a whole. We need about a 3%. And the CPI was hit last year with some what economists call exogenous shocks, and those are kind of supply shocks typically that can't be forecasted. So some of the commodity prices, we're seeing that today with the increase in gas and oil. Those, as I mentioned, are hard to forecast. So, given that aggregate demand is still not barreling along, we don't think we're going to see the inflation rate as high this year as it was last year. And in fact, for anyone that's been around even half as long as I've been around, a 2.5% or even a 3.2% inflation rate is amazing. But we'll be watching that pretty carefully. I like talking about consumer confidence because I think that the willingness of consumers to spend and their mindset is an important part of the psychology of the economy. And a couple of observations. One, we're way up from where we were at the bottom of the cycle in the beginning of 2009, so that's 3 years ago. We're still way down from the 2003 to 2007 peak. The second half of last year, consumer confidence had a strong upward movement, and it was correlated to a large extent with the improvement in the labor market, and the decline in unemployment. We pulled back a little bit in January, but I think in general we are expecting to see consumer confidence continue to move forward. The biggest drag in the economy, and again, I'm a housing market economist, so I may be looking at it with that perspective, but I think one of the really big issues with this recovery cycle that makes it unique from others, and every cycle is unique, but we still have, this is data from the third quarter from CoreLogic, almost 30% of the mortgages in California are underwater. And you've kind of heard the term shadow inventory. It's been around for a while, and it's hard to understand what the exact number is. And that's because it depends on how you want to define it. Do you define it as the number of properties where a notice of default has been filed, or do you broaden it up to include all of these homeowners who, some of them will obviously be going into default and foreclosure. Some of them may actually be in default, but the bank hasn't really acted on it yet. And I do think there's really two issues I want to make. One is that if you're a homeowner underwater, there's not much place, there's no really place for you to go. You may just be stalled for a while, and you're certainly not going to be making any proactive financial decisions that are going to stimulate the economy, right? You've got an issue. On the other hand, I don't know about you, but when I go to malls or if I go on the freeway, a month or two ago, I went in and had dinner at Smitty's, which is a kind of a steak martini place on Lake. And my friend looked at me and said, "What recession?" It was like a Thursday night, and there was no room at the bar or anything. I think there's a little bit of a squatter economy going on, where you have people that haven't paid for maybe 9 months, a year, 18 months on their mortgages, so they have more money. And the idea also would be that more transactions are going underground, and that you have more maybe bartering going on as people really try to make it through this cycle. So I guess my main point here is, the data may not always be what it seems, because you can only measure what you can really measure. And that leads me into kind of the unemployment data. Fabulous news in December. The national unemployment rate was the lowest it's been in 3 years. 8.5%. California, 11.1%. And you can see there was a 2-year period where the California unemployment rate was over 12%. Now, a question I am frequently asked is, come on, what's the real rate of unemployment? Now, I do want to defend the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They've been measuring the unemployment rate for 40 plus years. And their definition is, in order to be counted as unemployed, you need to be actively looking for work. And if you become a discouraged worker and drop out of the actively looking labor force, you're not counted. So there are a number of other estimates that might go as high as 14 or 15% if you included the discouraged workers. And how about the people that are underemployed? How about the people that have a teaching credential but they're working in a mall because teachers are being laid off and so on and so forth? So the answer to the question, what is the real rate of unemployment, is, in my view, the pain is much worse than is represented by the data. On the other hand, the rate at which the data is changing is indicative of an economy that is improving. The other thing about unemployment that you need to keep in mind is it is a lagging indicator. Companies don't tend to hire full-time workers until the recovery is well on its way and they're sure that they're going to have the demand for their product to keep them employed, all right? The other thing that happens is, as the unemployment rate goes down and the economy kicks in, you can have the unemployment head back up again for a little while, because what happens to the discouraged workers? They get encouraged again and come back and they're actively looking. So anyway, I at my kind of ripe old age in doing this, I don't feel that there's really kind of bad data and good data. I think you just need to understand the assumptions and the methodology behind it and interpret it appropriately. One of the things that I found particularly encouraging about the data that came out in December was the fact that construction and financial activities, and you can see that they were two sectors that, no surprise, were hit very hard during the downturn. If you look at the drop in both of those sectors between 2005 and the middle of last year, construction employment was off 338,000, financial activities employment, where all of us are counted, down about 164,500. We had job growth, small but positive, in both of those areas. In fact, in 2011, California new housing permits were up 5%. So that's the good news. Permits have actually been growing now for 2 years in a row. The other longer term good news is we're not building very much housing in California, obviously. You know, there's no reason to right now, but part of it has to do with you have households that have 2 generations and sometimes 3 generations under one roof in order to kind of make it through the economic downturn. So as we work through these economic hurdles and get back to whatever normal is going to mean going forward, we are going to see more robust construction in California, 5-8 years down the line. We're not going to remain here forever. Let me just say a couple of words about monetary and fiscal policy. A couple of weeks ago, the Fed met and came out with a very interesting announcement that, for anyone that's been following the Fed for years and years, would be quite surprised by. The Fed said, we are going to keep the target Fed funds rate low through the end of 2014. And you can see the target for the funds rate for the last 3 years has essentially been 0, right? Why would they do that? Well, they are attempting to remove one of the major obstacles to economic growth, and that is uncertainty. They want to make sure that people understand that the Fed is not going to pull the rug out from under the economy in the next 2 years. So that's, I think, very helpful. The issue with the economy now, and certainly in the housing market, is not the level of rates. It really goes back to the percent of households that are underwater, right? So you don't have kind of the normal trade-up market that you would. And you also have, I think, a much tighter underwriting environment that might be justified by the cycle. And this is what I kind of find very interesting about the last 4 or 5 years. In 2005 and 2006, as you hit what was very clear was the top of the market, isn't that the time to really double down on underwriting? And today, when prices are off 20, 30, 40, 50% from their highs, depending on what part of California you're looking at, isn't that the time to get those loans made? So it kind of is a little bit of a quandary, if you will. So what about fiscal policy? We are not looking for the federal government to provide any kind of stimulus to the housing sector going forward. In fact, we are really concerned about maintaining what tax advantages and other constructs there are as we get through this cycle. One of the things that I have noticed is that 2 or 3 years ago, as we really were going through the worst of this, there seemed to be a consensus understanding that if we help the housing market, the rest of the economy's got to get better. And there was a focus on housing. And today, I don't see that. And the Obama administration, to its credit, has come out with some new programs. We had the settlement with the attorney generals in the wake of the robo-signing fiasco and so on. So there are some things happening, but in general, we're not expecting to see anything. And in fact, there are some really important issues that I want to just reiterate to you, because I know you already are aware of them. I think number one is, what is the secondary mortgage market going to look like 3, 4, 5 years from now? And as important as tax reform is, and as critical as the mortgage interest deduction is, I will say that I think the future of the secondary mortgage market trumps everything, because if people can't get an affordable mortgage, they're really not going to be in a position to care about the mortgage interest deduction. You see, and I don't mean that that's not critical, and we have you know, a very large majority of the California congressional delegation has signed on to a resolution that says we support the mortgage interest deduction as it currently exists. So this is an issue that is, you know, very near and dear to our hearts. It's a simple one. It's easy to carry the message. The issue, I think, is for any of you that were around in 1986, when you get major tax reform, which I think is very likely to be on the table after the election, you typically have a situation where you've got a bill that's, what, 4,000 or 5,000 pages. It's 11:30 and the deadline is midnight, and everybody cuts their deals and signs it, and there you go. And that's what happened in 1986 when we got the $1 million cap on the mortgage amount that's deductible for the MID. So we are very engaged in that. But I do think, again, the future of Fannie and Freddie is critical, and I want to give you an example of what we're looking at. You might be familiar with QRM, Qualified Residential Mortgage. That was a construct that was part of the Dodd-Frank bill, and it wasn't part of the bill, but as the definition of a qualified residential mortgage has been proposed, it includes requirement that the loan have a 20% down payment. That wasn't part of Dodd-Frank, but it's part of what's coming out of Congress as they try to figure out how to implement it. Now, I think the idea is really a good one. If you're making a risky loan, the lender has to hold part of it in portfolio. They can't sell the whole loan. So you need, you know, they figured, look, if a lending institution has some skin in the game, they're going to be more careful about the type of loans that they make. That makes a lot of sense. From our perspective, and again, I'm speaking from the perspective of the Realtor party, from our perspective, there isn't a significant difference in default from a property that has a 15% down or a 20% down, for example. And in California, that down payment difference can make a huge difference in how soon a first-time buyer can pay. So that's one issue. The second issue is it's really not hard to imagine a committee a year or two from now getting together and kind of laying out the new construct for the secondary mortgage market and saying, okay, well, we need some kind of a GSE entity, but look, we've got this QRM. Let's just say that they can only buy loans that are QRM. Well, and maybe that's okay, except that over the last 12 years, less than 1 in 5 of the Fannie Freddie loans have met QRM as it is currently defined. So that just gives you a window into what your trade associations are involved in, and it's big stakes, and 2, why your involvement is so important in terms of responding to calls to action and supporting the effort. So anyway, that's my kind of wrap up of some of the highlights of the national economy, closing here with just a summary of the outlook, which again, as we've looked at before, shows growth in 2012, movement in recovery, but it's going to be a rather, continue to be a rather slow workout, if you will. So where are we doing in California? How's the market? That's the great question. Don't you always get that question, how's the market? Well, for the state as a whole, and I will get very local very quickly, but for the state as a whole, in 2011, sales were up about 1.1% compared to 2010. And let me just give you kind of the broad overview of this cycle. 2002 to 2005, housing boom. Fourth quarter of 2005, you can start to see the decline statewide, in the statewide numbers. So that's when we first started to see sales below where they were a year ago. It happened much earlier in San Bernardino. It happened much later in San Marino, right? In fact, it didn't hit the high-end areas until the credit crunch and you couldn't get a jumbo loan. So that's how that went. It bottomed in the fall of 2007. 2008 and 2009, the market grew double digits. Why? Well, you had a lot of REO sales in the central areas of California. Properties were selling for less than replacement cost, and investors and first-time buyers were moving in big time. 2010, the first half of the year was robust. Tax credits, right, were helping. The second half, not quite so much till right at the end where the investor purchases, and we've got, you know, all-time highs in terms of cash purchases nationally and in California. And then in 2011, we started out strong. We kind of had a pullback in the beginning of the year. And a lot of this is really tied to the flow of REO coming on the market. Unlike some of the other states that were hit hard, California is doing a fabulous job and a very efficient job at moving REO properties from for sale to sale. And it's one of the reasons why we are, as the Realtor Party, opposing the bulk sale proposal. I hope you've been reading about that on our website, because we don't think we really need some giant investment bank to buy a big pool of REO at a great discount and push prices down. We think that realtors are doing a great job with the medium and smaller investors and first-time buyers. So anyway, that's just, again, another example of how politics gets involved in all this. And as we look at the data for January, and our release just came out yesterday, so I apologize that I don't have this slide updated. We've actually started on a really positive note, and you'll see that in the local data coming up. Here's a snapshot at the end of last year. 52.7% of the sales, this is data reported to us from MLSs across the state. 52.7 were sales, and I don't know what to call these exactly. It's a traditional sale where the seller has equity in their home, so it's not a distressed sale. 24.6% were REO, and 22.2% were short sale. A year earlier, there were more REO and fewer short sales, so we are seeing improvement in the short sale front. It's still a lengthy process, but it's happening a little bit faster. In Los Angeles County in December, 21% of the properties were REO sales and 27% were short sales. And you can easily get these numbers for zip codes and cities that you are active in your real estate practice, because I think it's really important to be an educator for your clients, right? Because any aggregate data that makes the headlines of a local, regional, or national paper is not going to reflect local market conditions. So it's an important way for you to be in touch. Median home price, absolutely the same. So this is a statewide median. We have never ever seen a cycle where the median home price has dropped. In fact, prior to this cycle, we used to say, I've said, wow, housing prices are really sticky on the way down. Because, in the late 70s to early 80s, the market dropped in terms of transactions 61%, and prices just plateaued out. Now, that doesn't mean in local committees they didn't go down significantly, but typically when you get like a statewide number, you kind of get rid of all the volatility. Not this time. We had a 59% drop in the median home price between May of 2007 and February of 2009, so very significant. Inventory is actually tight. I hear this, anecdotally in the field, you see it in the data. The long-term average for inventory, and again, it's a ratio, listings to sales, is between a 6 and 7 month supply. So in December, we had a 4.2 month supply of homes on the market. Now, it varies significantly depending on whether you're looking at the lower end of the market or the upper end of the market, right? There's so much competition for distressed properties that in December, there was less than a 5 month supply for properties priced under $300,000. There was an 8.2 month supply for properties priced over $1 million. And again, this is the type of calculation you can do for a zip code, a city, a neighborhood, to really educate your clients on what their market looks like compared to, I'm sorry, I read December, you know, I have this argument with my researchers all the time. It's like, I like to look at the first column. So let me just rewind and say 8.3 months for $1 million or more, 3.9 months for under 300,000. But you can do a similar calculation to show people how different the price categories make. Look at this same approach where you break it out by equity sale with about a normal supply, 6.7 months. REO, 2.7, right? Ratio of listings to sales. And short sales, let's be honest, short sales last longer than many celebrity marriages. There is a 8.9 month supply. It is really a long-term commitment if you get involved in a short sale. So let me just say a couple of things. We had some big headlines, some good news last week with respect to the Attorney General's suit on the lenders related to the robo-signing issue and other issues. California held out to the very, very end and got a significant share of that payout, about $18 billion. And I just put up here on the slide how that's going to be allocated. $12 billion for principal reduction. Now this is implemented over a 3-year period, so that's unfortunate, I think, for people that are in trouble right now. We also don't have all the details available, so we don't know who's going to qualify yet, but that will be coming. $849 million for refinancing that, you know, that group of 30% of mortgages that are underwater. $279 million in restitution, $1.1 billion for the unemployed, transitional assistance and blight, and $3.4 billion to get the unpaid loans off the books. Here are the two, and again, you'll be able to download this presentation, but here are the two websites where the information will be posted, and C.A.R.org will also be presenting that information, because I know we're getting questions, you know, can my, can my client qualify? Can I qualify? And as soon as the information is available, we'll be getting that information to you. Is it going to dramatically change the landscape in California in terms of how quickly we move through our foreclosure inventory? No, it's not, but it is a step. It is a step in the right direction. This is a look at where we are today, comparing today with, you know, a very long-term time trend. This data starts in the beginning of 1974. The long-term delinquency rate in the state is 4.4%. We're currently at about 7.6, but we're well below the 11+% at the peak. So again, moving in the right direction. With respect to the foreclosure rate, we're at 3.6, long-term average is 1.2. We have a business partner at C.A.R, Foreclosure Radar. It's a fabulous website. If you want to subscribe, I think with the C.A.R discount, it's something like $45 a month. It may not be worth it if you're not heavily involved in this market, but if you are, the data is unbelievable. It's like who has the first, who has the second. They're fabulous photos, which I'll share with you in just a minute. There's also a lot of free information. There's a Foreclosure Truth blog, a lot of Q&As. If you have clients that just really want to get into kind of shadow inventory issues, fabulous website. So here's just one of the screenshots of California data showing you over a 4-year period what's happened to the trend of properties in pre-foreclosure. So that's a notice of default has been filed, 60 days or more delinquent, scheduled for sale, auction date has been set, and bank-owned, properties that the bank actually took back and are available for sale. So if we look at 2011, the NODs compared to all of 2010 are off 19.7%, so moving down. Property scheduled for auction off 21.7%, and bank-owned properties available for sale, that inventory's flat, really up 0.6%. Now, let me kind of talk about LA County and then get local. Currently, this is as of yesterday. This is, again, the type of data you can get off their website. For LA County, there are 13,793 properties where an NOD has been filed. So there are a lot more NODs than green dots, but you get the picture. Auctions have been scheduled for 19,444 properties. And there are 5,490 REO properties for sale. So what does that mean for you guys? Well, in San Gabriel, there are 30 properties where an NOD has been filed. There are 46 auctions scheduled, and there are only 10 bank-owned properties for sale. Do you see why consumers are confused? You know, the LA County data comes out, and they come to you and say, I want a 50 cent on the dollar REO in San Gabriel today. And you're like, well, let me show you something else. In Alhambra, there's 44 properties in pre-foreclosure, 59 auctions scheduled, and you've got a whopping 13 bank-owned properties for sale. In Rosemead, 47 in pre-foreclosure, 52 auctions scheduled, 11 bank-owned. Let me go a little bit further. My neighborhood, Pasadena, 165 in pre-foreclosure, auctions set for 246 and 64 bank-owned. How about Altadena, 66, 109 and 22. San Marino, forget about it. Forget about it. And then finally, I want to just show you Sacramento. 2,216 in pre-foreclosure, 1,905 auction, 1,560. So that's why you will feel in San Gabriel, in Rosemead, a disconnect with the statewide data, or even the LA County data, right? And that's something to share with your clients, because they're gonna go, wow, I had no idea. And how would they? Because that's the kind of information that you bring to them. It's not the kind of information that's going to be in the media. So let's just talk about, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't bring this down far enough. In LA County, there were 3,310 units that closed escrow. The median home price in January was $306,500. All right, what about San Gabriel? San Gabriel in January, 16 units closed escrow. I hope some of them are in this room represented, I hope, okay? And the median home price was $460,000, down month to month, up slightly on a year-over-year basis. Please note the y-axis does not go to zero. It goes to like 380, so it's a very amplified graph, if you will. How about Alhambra? Alhambra, there were 20 units that closed escrow in January, down month to month, down year to year. There is a seasonal slowdown in prices. Happens, every cycle. Typically, families buy bigger, higher-end houses, and that market kind of disappears in October, November, December, January, and then as we get back into the spring home buying season. The other thing to note is you're looking at Alhambra, there are 20 units that closed. That's not a lot, you know what I mean? And so then when you look at the median price, it may be that just a lot more expensive homes got sold or a lot fewer condominiums got sold. So anyway, you've got the ability with the MLS to kind of dig into these numbers and be able to explain it to your buyers and sellers. How about Rosemead? 12 units closed escrow in Rosemead in January, up on a month-to-month basis, down on a year-over-year basis. Median home price, $329,900, down month to month, down year to year. And again, when you're looking at so few transactions, the condo, single family share, or, the short sale, REO equity sale mix can change and impact that significantly. So that just gives you, I think, a snapshot, hopefully, of the market, and also some ideas on how to mine the MLS for information to educate your clients. I have some friends who are a team of realtors in the kind of West Hollywood, Beverly Hills area, and they have 3 physical folders with data that they give to clients who are looking for housing. And one is a REO market, one is short sale, and one is traditional or equity sale. And they've got it really laid out beautifully, but it's a way of talking to buyers and showing them how different the experience is likely to be, not based on the agent's opinion, but really looking at the data. You know, time on the market, median price, multiple offers, all cash, those kinds of things. And that's what I want to get into next, with a little data from a survey that C.A.R. has been doing. Oh my goodness, it must be about 35 years or so. In June of every year, we ask California realtors about their last closed transaction. So the way to interpret this data is a snapshot in time. And just to show you how times have changed, I used to say a snapshot in time, but now I have to say a snapshot in time. Get it? Smartphone? Anyway, never mind. Okay. Anyway, what this does is shows you kind of the different, how different the metrics are for equity sales, which were 58.7% of the transactions reported by that sample of realtors in June. 19.7% were REO and 20.2% were short sales. So a couple things I just want to point out. 35.2% of the equity sale transactions had multiple offers. 58 and 57% of the REO and short sale transactions, respectively, had multiple offers. The average number was 3. Very competitive marketplace. Look at all cash. A quarter of the equity sale transactions were all cash, but 34% of the REO transactions were all cash. Days on the MLS, to my celebrity marriage joke earlier, 141 days on the MLS for short sales, right? Because even if it's pending, it's counted as still in the MLS because it hasn't closed yet. One of the real concerns I have had the last couple of years is what impact the lack of a robust trade market is having on this cycle. And I saw it played out in the answer to this question: is the seller planning on purchasing another home? Well, in 2004 and 2005, over 70% of the realtors said, absolutely, they're buying. In 2010, about 33% said yes, less than half. It improved in 2011. But one of the things we did this year is we asked what was going on. Well, for 19.8% of those transactions, the seller was a lender or a bank, so they weren't going to obviously be buying anything. But look at the other answers, because I think it gives you such a great appreciation for the pain that many of your clients are facing. 11.4% said the seller really doesn't want to have that big a financial obligation. 10.9% said credit score shot, right? Poor credit. 5.7% didn't have a down payment. 4.9% didn't have a job. 4.7% love living with mom again. And 2.7% said they were waiting for the market to bottom. Now, in the we also asked what was the single most important reason for buying and selling the property. And for 33% of the sellers, it was a foreclosure. They had no choice. But look at all the other answers, from change in family status, retired, investment, wanted a better location, bigger job, smaller job, change jobs, bigger house, smaller house, change jobs. There is a normal market out there. You know, people are motivated by all the things that happen in life that trigger the need to change their living arrangements. So don't lose sight of that. And one of the things to figure out is, how do I keep in touch with people that are going to be in that position? About 17% of you said that the buyer was an investor. 7% said it was a current homeowner who was buying a vacation or a second home for their own use. So there's a lot of great deals at the beach and up in the mountains, in Big Bear, up in Lake Tahoe at this point in time. And we were interested in whether the buyer was a foreign buyer. Well, in 2008, it was 8%, dropped to 5% in 2010, and last year it increased to 6%. And so it's kind of a niche market, but in some areas of California, in parts of the Bay Area, San Marino, parts of West LA, it's a very important part and dynamic part of the overall housing market. So let me kind of close the market part of my remarks with this, and that is that we came in 2011 with a 1.1% increase. In 2012, we're expecting another increase, but very, very modest. And if you kind of eyeball this, it's not really an issue of the number of transactions that are happening. I think the issue for our industry and for your clients is just how difficult many of them are and how long they take and the level of prices. So even though we're expecting to see a rebound in prices in 2012, a little bit shy of 2%, we're still below the 300,000 threshold, if you will, that was breached in 2009. So, you know, you've got a market that in 2012 is going to look, I would have to say, a lot like 2011, with some acceleration in the REOs coming on the market, which I think is good, some improvement in consumer confidence and jobs. So moving in the right direction. I think we have bottomed or are in the process of bottoming, and we are heading back up. But, you know, to a certain extent, okay, that's your canvas. What are you going to do about it, right? What are you as a real estate agent going to do about it? So let me just throw out some ideas. We surveyed last year, we do this every year, people who had actually purchased a home in California in 2011. And here's what we found out. Most of them used a realtor.
Yeah.
Yes, 94%. 58% said they found you online. That does not mean 20 years of postcards have not had an impact. And you shouldn't stop doing traditional marketing, but it does mean that in their mind, they were on the internet and that's where they connected with you. Over half of them interviewed at least 2 agents. You are, as you know, in a very competitive marketplace, even though our membership has dropped from 211,000 California realtors in 2006 to 154,000 this year.
Yeah.
That's a big drop, but it's still very competitive, right? 51% of the home buyers said yes, they Googled you. So you need to Google you. I'm sure you've already done that, and if there's any photos from that weekend in Cabo that you don't want you don't want your clients to see, you might make a few adjustments, but you also want to Google your clients before you meet them and find out a little bit about them as well. 93% of the buyers said they would love to hear from you on Facebook, Twitter, social media. So that's one of the biggest changes we saw in the survey in 2011, was just how the tipping point was breached in terms of social media. 54% said they would work with the same agent again. In hindsight, typically it's single digits, the number of people that actually work with the same agent again. And I would like to suggest that to a certain extent that's because they aren't contacted after the close of escrow. That's just an absolutely critical part of this business, is staying in touch, keeping it a warm contact, right, going forward. And 80% said they would find agent ratings beneficial. What are agent ratings? Well, a corollary would be if there's a new restaurant in town, have you ever gone on Yelp to see what people are saying about the restaurant? Well, they're also going on Yelp to see what people are saying about you, and they're also going on Zillow to see if anybody's written anything about you. The problem with Zillow as an example is there aren't any checks and balances, so someone can go in and write things that never had a transaction with you. That's a problem. We are, C.A.R., in the midst of a pilot program with a company called Quality Service Certified that is a third-party entity but it's under the Realtor umbrella, if you will, and it's, you know, the surveys are mailed out or emailed out to clients, and it's all very, you know, controlled in terms of just the integrity of the responses. Let's be honest, does anybody really like to be reviewed? Of course not. Of course not. But is it the way the world is today? Absolutely. So do we want to embrace something that at least is accurate? Absolutely. Okay, the average buyer last year thought about buying for 4 months, spent 2.5 months on the internet, looking around, spent 8 weeks with you looking at 12 homes, and went into escrow. For 3/4 of them, the escrow didn't close on time, so alert, opportunity, set the expectation. Don't tell them, because you don't know if their escrow will close on time or not, but share the data with them, right? NAR reported a year ago that 10% of properties nationally were falling out of escrow. A year later, it's over 30%. 2 main reasons: loan didn't fund, appraisal came in under the negotiated value. Your clients need to understand that. The more they know, the fewer the surprises are, the more happy they will be with the transaction. 49% were trade-up buyers, 51% were first-timers. They all realize that affordability is at historic highs, and 80% found the home they purchased through the agent.
Yes.
Okay, yes. In 2011, 13% found the home on their own on a website. 4% found it on their own with a for sale sign, and 3% went through an open house. I think 80% is great, but you know what? 4 years ago it was 90%. 90% found their home through the agent, less than about half, 7% on a website, 1% for sale, and 2% open house. Now I do want to say markets were very different, you know, and in 2007 that was a really hot market, right? And it was the agent who knew before anybody else what was coming, what was happening, and so on. So part of this may be market driven, but I think part of it also represents the rise of the web, right? And I mean, that sounds so trite given the rise of the web's like 20 years ago, but you know what I mean? The rise of people utilizing the web to get information. We asked what websites you used as part of your home buying process. These were the top responses that we got, and you can see just all very familiar. And then we asked what was the most useful website in your home buying process. Number 1 is Realtor.com. Number 2 was Zillow. Number 3 was your real estate company website. And number 4 was your website. So the firm that you're with and your own representation of the market and your professionalism, very important for clients. 44% of the buyers said they only interviewed 1 agent, but 36% interviewed 2, 12% interviewed 3, 19% interviewed 8 or more. Now my advice would be I would be on the third agent on a transaction with one of these 19%, because clearly they're looking for something that's hard to find. Okay. We asked what was the single most important reason that you chose your agent. Responsiveness, prior knowledge, aggressiveness, and that doesn't mean like King Kong, you know, it means like communication, I'm ready to work, you know, all the how you do that. Knowledgeability. Response time is critical. We asked them to rate the importance of time that you get back, okay? 39% said it's important, 57% said extremely important. If there is one thing you do this year to improve your customer service, cut your response time in half, in a quarter, whatever, improve your response time, because that really is something that blows people away. And I know it even with myself. You know, someone emails me and says, can I have a copy of your presentation? Or, you know, if I'm sitting at my desk and able to get back to them right away, I typically get back a, wow, thanks. You know, I'm not always able to do it, but I try. 36% of your buyers want to be responded to instantly. Is that doable? No. So what do? You have to have a conversation about it, right? When you first connect with a client, say, how often do you want to hear from me, and in what format? Right? My old joke was that would reduce the divorce rate if people did that before they got married. I love you dearly. How often do you want to hear from me, and in what format? But you understand, it's like people, as long as they understand, so you might say, my goal is to respond to you instantly, but I may be with another client, and I'm going to give that client the same undivided attention that I'm giving you right now. In fact, my cell phone is in my car. Always leave your cell phone in your car when you are going to meet with a client in their home, because even a little vibration is going to get you off track. It is. 100% focus for that hour, half hour, 2 hours that you're with them. The emotional, their view of you will always be in high regard because you've given them your complete attention. Is there anything more that you can give to anyone than to listen and give them your full attention? So get rid of anything that's distracting. Okay, I'm kind of gearing up for the end here with the last major segment, which is the home seller survey. So these are homeowners who completed a transaction and sold last year. So we found that the home was listed on average for more than 7 months. The median was 28 weeks. The median length of escrow was 1.5 months. Only 40% of the sellers closed escrow on time. And 20% of the sellers used electronic signature, which we're interested in measuring at C.A.R. because you do have a free member benefit with digital ink at C.A.R. So hopefully you've been able to take advantage of that. A couple of just interesting aspects of sellers. 48% last year were first-timers, first-time sellers. You've had a significant increase since 2008 as the first-time buyers that came into the market in 05, 06, and 07 had ARM adjustments or price decreases or job losses that got them into trouble, and they've had to sell that first home. We asked them for the top reasons for selling. Their mortgage was unaffordable, loss of income, loss of jobs. But look at number 4, low prices allowed upgrade. So that's a very important message for past clients that you have, right? Low prices will permit you an upgrade. 41% of the sellers said they were a short sale, 59% a regular equity traditional sale. There was a gap between list and sale price. 385,996 was the median list price. 335,025 was the median sale price. You can calculate this with your MLS data and use it as a visual aid with sellers, not to say that their listing price is not reasonable, but to say that the market in this zip code is saying that we can expect to see some kind of a reduction from, and kind of do it as part of your whole pricing strategy conversation. I mentioned the NAR numbers, and this just gives you kind of a look at, it's loan approval, loan funding, and some of these you can control, and some of these you cannot control. But what's important, again, is to have the conversation with the client as you go into escrow and give them a walkthrough. You know how Facebook now has the timeline thing? I haven't really gotten with it yet because I really can't bear to look at pictures of myself from 30 years ago. But I'll have to get over that. But imagine a timeline for the transaction that you share with the client so they know all of the things that happen. Because especially if you're a first-time buyer, what do you think is the biggest issue with the transaction? Finding the home, right? And then when you go through it the first time, you're like, oh my goodness, that was just the start. So you want to set expectations appropriately. We asked where the sellers found you, and it's, again, internet, but it doesn't mean your traditional marketing hasn't had an impact. Referrals, the real estate company's website, for sale signs, prior knowledge, all of those things come into play. Why did you select the agent you did? You can see these responses look almost identical to what the buyers were looking for, so that's great for you. You don't have to change how you do your business. It's response time, it's knowledgeability, it's really being a hard worker. I thought this was fascinating. 22% of the sellers said that they had more than one agent involved in the transaction. For a short sale, it was 43%, almost half. For a regular equity sale, it was 8%. Isn't that interesting? And boomers, which may have had more of the short sales, were 44, Gen X and Gen Ys, 18 and 20%. Did you use social media in the home selling process? Now, this is interesting because it goes to the point I made earlier about a tipping point. In 2010, 24% of the sellers said, yes, we use social media. In 2011, it was 77%. Huge tipping point. And here's all the different social media that were going on. We are in the process at C.A.R. of kind of trying to clean out our drives because our server is overburdened, because in the last year, the server demand, or space, I don't know all the right words, but you get what I'm saying, has doubled. And it's doubled because of all the video. World is kind of going video. Here's a look at the response time comparing what they expected. So look at, for sellers, instantaneously is over 40%, but only 15% received an instantaneous response. So in all of those, within 30 minutes, within 1 hour, you can see there's a lot of room for improvement in the industry as a whole in terms of response time. So to my comment earlier. So let me close with just a couple of thoughts before we get into the Q&A. This slide, I think, is absolutely fascinating, and I've really brought together the seller question and the buyer question. And the question was, do you think home prices in your neighborhood will go up, down, or stay flat in the next year? So these responses are for the next year. Look at the sellers. Over half of them say prices in the neighborhood where I just sold my house are going down. Flat, maybe 30%, and looks like almost 20% up. So what you get is a feeling for just how depressed and negative their view is, right? They are happy that closed and they're moving on. Look at the buyers. This really blows my mind. All of the buyers feel like they have timed the market perfectly. None of them think prices are going to go down. Flat, up, but look at the unsure category. And how I interpret that is that the buyers don't really care. They got a fabulous home. Not only is our housing prices attractive, housing is on sale and the money to buy the housing is on sale, right? So they got a great mortgage and a great property. It's exceeded their dreams. So they're just really positive, So you're a psychological counselor to a certain extent. You've got two very different groups here. The Pew Research Center came out with a study last year looking at home sweet home still, 5 years after the bubble burst. 8 in 10 Americans in this survey agree buying a home is the best investment one can make. 8 in 10 renters would like to buy in the future. Wow. I mean, that's not a headline anywhere, right? But there you go. One of the favorite things I do at C.A.R. in addition to going out and speaking is working with our strategic planning committee. And I'm a great reader. I believe in lifelong learning. There's so many great things out there, and I just wanted to share with you the books that the C.A.R. Strategic Planning Committee has read so far this year. So we've read Tom Friedman and Michael Mandelbaum's book, That Used to Be Us. It's a little bit of a downer, but probably something we all need to kind of just make sure we understand, that we need to be more competitive and make sure our kids are doing their homework and all that stuff. But it's a, you know, it really kind of lays out the trend over the last 10 years in particular, because not only did we have a financial crisis, we have a tipping point in terms of our labor competing overseas, and you know, all this stuff has been going on for a long, long time, but it's hit very hard over the last several years. We read or are reading the Steve Jobs biography. I also just listened in my car to another book called Inside Apple. Just fascinating, you know, I mean, not the nicest guy, but a true visionary, you know, and a real look at how different corporate cultures can be and how they pulled this off, and the attention to detail. You know, I mean, you may not think like response time is that important, but it's details like that. You know, the fact that, you know, I got back as quickly as I could, you know, or I made sure this was perfect, or whatever it is. You know, people remember that, you know, that kind of caring. And then Once Upon a Car is fabulous. I am not a car person at all. I read this book in 2 days because it was fascinating. It's not about the auto industry as much as it is about leadership, corporate culture. It takes you through the roller coaster ride of the big three over the last 5 or 6 years, and it's got to come out as an HBO movie one of these days, because it's just absolutely fascinating. The company like Ford, one of the reasons Ford made it out without going into bankruptcy is that in 2006 they mortgaged everything, including their blue oval, and they had enough money to survive, right, and do things differently. GM didn't, Chrysler didn't, and it's anyway, highly recommend all of those. So my last 2 slides are just a summary of, if I were in the audience, what should I have remembered from Leslie's remarks? So with respect to the economy and the housing market, worst is over, recovery slow, low rates through end of 2014. And I will say, if rates aren't low through 2014, it will actually be very good news, and because it will mean economic growth is more robust than we think it's going to be. Biggest wild card, and I didn't mention this earlier, the Eurozone, I think is a real cause for concern. I think the ability of Greece to stay the course is questionable, as well as some of the other countries. I think it's unlikely to end as badly as it could. I think China is really well aware of their position and role and interest in seeing this resolved, but it could be another redux of the financial crisis if they don't hold the Eurozone together. Biggest policy issue, future Fannie Freddie FHA, and the fact that you can't generalize about the market. You've really got to look at REO, short sale, or equity sale. In terms of how you do your business, remember that real estate is local, that aggregate news releases, aggregate data is a wonderful opportunity for you to send a press release, NAR press release out to your farm, your clients, and say, you probably heard C.A.R. NAR's chief economist, Lawrence Yun, talking about the national statistics. Let me tell you what's going on in Rosemead, right? Narrow it in. Talk to your clients about communication. How do they want to hear from you? Talk to them about what's likely to happen through the transaction. Talk to them about how likely closing escrow on time may or may not be. So there aren't, all you want to do is mitigate surprises. People understand as long as you explain it to them. Audit your own website. Do you have the type of website that would interest you if you were looking for a home in the area that you represent? Go to some websites in Long Island, go to another part of the country and just take a look at the websites that appeal to you as a consumer if you were going to move there, right? And make sure that your website represents what would appeal to you. And I think the final comment I want to make is just back to basics. We had a top producer come and speak to C.A.R. staff a few weeks ago. He works down in Newport. And one of the things I want to say is, it's hard. I don't remember a time where it's been hard to get a top producer panel together. I find that top producers are more than happy to tell everyone exactly what they do. Because what they do is not a secret. What's a secret is, how do you do that every day? It's hard to do. And this guy was pretty amazing. He said he moved out from Colorado. He worked in Fort Collins, Colorado at a kind of a very famous brokerage called The Group. Came out to California, knew no one. And the first year in the business, he held an open house every day. Christmas, Mother's Day, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, every day. Today, he still writes 10 handwritten thank you notes a day. He keeps track of all the people that he wants to thank. Now, he has someone in his office that, writes the address and puts the stamp on, but that's kind of his brand, if you will. If he's meeting, if he doesn't have any appointments scheduled on a Sunday, but all of a sudden he needs to meet with a client, he goes home and puts a suit and tie on. Because his feeling is, I only have one opportunity to make a first impression, and this is how I look, this is how I approach the business. And I could go on and on, but it was really interesting to just hear how, when he flies out of LAX, he has a driver, because if it's an 80-minute ride, 76 minutes of those are taken up by all of the phone calls that he knows he needs to make. So nothing is left to chance. And we all can't live that way. I couldn't do that in a million years, but there are different ways of doing the business, but back to basics, and one of the things we're doing at the California Association of Realtors, every member on staff, we're just starting it, but if it goes well, we'll do it the whole year. Every person on staff is writing a thank you note to C.A.R. members, 40 a month. And it's not, buy this or go to this, it's thank you for being a member. Here's my email, phone number. If there's anything I can do, thank you for your membership. Back to basics, because the more digital and social media and everything we get, I think the more valuable the face-to-face contact is. And it's not that you may not have a transaction where you never meet the person, it's all text, I've heard of that. But when you do have an opportunity for face-to-face, really make it work. So that's all I've got. Thank you very much for coming today. You've just been a wonderful audience, and I'd be very happy to turn it over to Albert and start questions, or just stay here and whatever you want to do.
Before turning to Q&A, I would like to, on behalf of the board of directors of Western Green Valley Association, all of you here, as well as the entire membership, to thank Leslie for the wonderful speeches you have here for us. Wasn't it wonderful?
Yes.
Anytime you go to Expo, you have to pay like $70, $80 to listen to her speech. So we're so honored, we're so lucky.
Sorry, Albert, it's 150.
There you go. And,
lunch though, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I just want all the board directors to stand up if you don't mind. And you can see the representative of this association. Almost all the directors really come here to listen to your speech too, so thank you. So now open to Q&A. Now please keep in mind, Leslie have to go back to pick up the car. I'm going to drive her to pick up the car. She have a 12:30 appointment. So
Just in Pasadena.
Just in Pasadena. So
Yeah.
I just want to be sure that she's on time too. Any question? There's a mic over there for a question, please.
Hold up.
Yes.
The mic.
He's on.
That works, yeah. Push the button down below. I think it's just time
I
out.
got a lot of voice. What are your thoughts on the rental market right now?
The rental market's strong.
very strong.
The rental market, the rates are up. You have a lot of people that are out of their homes. There's more new construction in multifamily. It's a very strong market right now, absolutely.
Yeah. Would you agree that I interact with a lot of people, a lot of open houses, you know, in the OC and all area out here. I find that maybe 2 or 3 out of 10 can afford a house. We have like 7 out of 10 that can't, so they're
Right.
going into the rental market.
Absolutely.
We all know that economically that the demand is always fixed to price. When demand goes up, price goes up.
Right.
And we're seeing a tremendous increase in rental.
Vacancy rates are down, yes,
Yeah, and they're going to that. So what are your thoughts? Do you see more rentals?
absolutely.
And also, would you also agree that you'll see more building of multifamily housing?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think you can see that in some of my graphs, and I also have a few that I can make available that looks at the rental data for the area, and great point.
Yeah.
Yes, very strong.
So in other words, one other thing on that same note, where you're seeing going after the investors, you know, and showing that, you know, the multifamily building has increased, so that'd be a good point for him to like invest in that. also.
Absolutely, yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Anybody? Okay. Leslie, thank you for coming for us.
My pleasure, I love being here, I love all your flags.
How do you see the election affecting our real estate market this year? Can
You
you
know-
share with that from your...
Okay, the question is, how is the election going to, you know, and that's such a multifaceted question. I will tell you that the key real estate related issues on the table, I don't think it's really going to make that much difference. I think we are going to get a look at major tax reform regardless of who is in the White House. I think we are going to see Fannie and Freddie re-envisioned regardless of who is in the White House. I mean, these are things that, you know, looking back, you know, kind of the world has changed, and certainly with respect to the deficit and the fiscal situation, I think there is tremendous support on both sides of the aisle to do something significant. Now, whether they're really going to be able to, you know, make good on that really remains to be seen. It's possible if we do get a change in the White House that we'll see some more aggressive action in terms of lowering tax rates, although as you saw this week that Obama has opposed lowering the corporate tax rate, although getting rid of some of the loopholes. But if you provide more tax breaks, you're also going to have to do a lot more cutting in terms of the expenditure side. So I guess, and I don't mean to sound naive, but the issues are so big with respect to the economy. I'm not sure. I think it really is going to be more up to Congress than it is who is really in the presidency. And again, I'm only focusing on kind of issues with respect to the housing market and the economy. Clearly, there's a lot of social type issues that are big in this election right now. But it's really hard for me to, I think, give a very satisfying answer to that because, you know, many things that have come out of the Obama administration have not been very pro-housing. You know, and typically when we go up in Congress, and I'm actually going to be in DC next week with our leadership, typically the Democrats have been more pro-housing, not all of them, but in general. And now we're not really seeing that. And again, it's kind of counting the votes and seeing who's up there. But I really don't see a big difference. I think we're going to get tax reform. I think we're going to see FHA and the GSEs transformed over the last 4 or 5 years. And we're just hoping that our message gets through to whoever is in those positions, that whatever we do, we need a voice at the table on what it looks like, and we need to move slowly, because the last thing in the world we need to do right now is rip the rug out from under the housing market recovery.
Can I have a quick question?
Certainly.
You mentioned about back to basics, but I look at some of the slides that you had. I noticed that today's buyers and sellers changing their way to look for agents also.
Yes.
So is that going to change the basic that we practice?
Well, I think basics is in terms of communication and discussions, and I think it's changing channels. So more social media is used, but the message can be the same. So I think what we have to do in terms of basics is not go, well, I write a thank you note, but I communicate meaningfully on a regular basis with my clients. I'm just doing it through Facebook and social media now. I'm not, this guy's kind of old school. He's like my age, baby boomer, so that's what he's comfortable doing. And I really think the key to being a success in whatever field you're in is being authentically who you are. And so if writing isn't your deal, do it a different way. But I've been really lucky in my career at C.A.R. and I always tell Joel this, I'm sure you could find, a much, an economist with more, technical and all that kind of stuff, but I found a niche where I'm kind of communicating, and I do it in my way and it works for me. Robert Kleinhans did it in a different way, and he was fabulous too. So don't take this as you need to do back to basics the same way for everybody. But for you, to me, let me just answer honestly from the heart, I think it means staying in touch with your clients in an authentic way. And I just find that so many agents don't do that. People don't like being dropped like a hot potato. You have become part of their world. Stay part of their world in a way that works for you, because I guarantee you that relationship will stay warm 5, 8, 10 years from now, or be recommended to their friends and all that kind of stuff. So that's a great question. I appreciate that. Thank you.
My question is relating to the bulk sale. Many weeks ago, I heard that there was a big meeting in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
with Freddie Mae and investors and REITs. I think we sell all the shadow inventory to all these big groups. And I think there's some truth to it, because I think Bank of America is about to release a pilot program which is going on right now,
Right.
called the mortgage to lease.
Mhm.
What they're going to do, they select homeowners to, based on their own criteria, to actually lease the property back, and then
Right.
Bank of America will forgive the debts up to 3 years. So my question is asking right now is, if indeed this is going to happen nationwide, how would this translate your economic forecast?
Well, just one thing, you've got what Bank of America is doing, and obviously the government can't control what lenders do, and that's one of the reasons why all of the HARP and the HAMP and the so on haven't really gotten traction, is they're not mandatory. The bulk sale issue that I was referring to is a pilot program for Freddie Mac properties that would essentially bundle them into very large amounts and allow them to be purchased by big investment banks and other groups, and buy them at a significant discount and either rent them out or sale. And that's the one that has not been approved yet. We are going to be meeting with Freddie and the FHFA. We've been on conference calls with NAR and the Obama administration. So that is not a done deal yet with that pilot program. In terms of what Bank of America is doing, I can't off the cuff give you, I think, a good answer to that. I don't know how successful the program's going to be. It's certainly going
We're
to.
about to start the program right now, because I'm part of the program.
Yeah.
And the way they're doing, there was a question asked actually. So what is in it for the agent? Are they going to sell the property in 3 years? And they say, oh no, there's no guarantee you're going to get the listing, but maybe there's a new owner. So we're figuring out that,
Right.
that Bank of America is probably trying to package it and sell it to
Right.
somebody.
Right. Yeah, so that's not that great for our industry, obviously, if they're taking it out of the flow, if you will. But I'll look into that. I wasn't aware that they were going to be launching that right
How would
away.
this translate your economic focus? You know,
Yeah, I can't,
obviously,
I can't, it's hard for me to know until I look into more details and really see how successful it's going to be and how many of their properties are actually going to, is this something they're planning to do in 3 months and just,
No, it's
Going
ongoing.
through.
It's
Yeah.
going to start right now.
yeah.
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 Thank you.
Good question. I'm sorry I can't give you a more. Yeah, just one or two more questions, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to go. I have a lunch with an agent in Pasadena in an hour. Yeah.
One of our viabilities to getting our economy going is jobs naturally, and California tends to have a tendency of not to have a very friendly environment, business-friendly environment. Do you see any changes in that? Because as you can see in the last few years, we've lost a tremendous amount of jobs to other states because we're chasing them out with our regulations and our taxation. So can you shed any light in it?
Well, I think a lot of the flow out, has been people kind of moving out because they've lost jobs and so on. I am not aware of any big dramatic changes coming from Sacramento with respect to the business environment. I think it would be very helpful if we did have those. The problem that state, regional, county, and local governments are facing right now is a huge deficit situation where they're having to kind of, lay people off and cut back and so on and so forth. So anything that kind of scores out in a positive way is not going to be attractive, right? Because it's just going to add to the deficit. So I think this has been an ongoing issue with California. Clearly there are certain things that can't move, and I think for our industry, right, property is local and realtors are local and so on and so forth, but we have lost, and again, we haven't lost just jobs to other states, we've lost jobs overseas as well, and that's really a bigger issue because you're looking at such big gaps in terms of wage rates and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not very optimistic on what you're laying out as what I think is a critical issue. Yes.
Yeah, the simple question is, the gasoline price right now is almost $4.50. If we keep on like this, continue for a while, approaching $5, and also the Middle East crisis with Iran.
Right.
What kind of negative impact will the housing market in the short and the long term?
Okay, well, just in terms of the housing market and kind of just to peel away kind of the global political instability, which is a huge issue in and of itself, but you're really going to get people moving inland, moving in closer to jobs. I think you're going to get an acceleration in kind of the higher density development. If you look at downtown LA, and I've lived here for a long time, I know many of you have, haven't we thought about, gee, this is the resurgence of downtown LA? I think we finally have seen it, and people moving closer to where they work. I think the idea of the metro going all the way to Santa Monica and so on, all of those things, people tend to, as transportation, as gas gets more expensive, they try to minimize that. So you'll see more carpooling and more movement closer to jobs and less movement out, into Riverside, San Bernardino, Palmdale, all those areas, because it's just too costly to commute. So I think it will have a big impact. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you.
Board directors, please stay here. We're going to have a good picture with Leslie. Also, staff is committed to edit the video. Thanks to Leslie, allow us to videotape. We're going to set it out over this weekend. So stay, check your email. You will have all the information with the PowerPoint presentation as well. Thank you. Yeah. Also, next week, March 1st, we have Gov Hudson here to do about legal updates. So don't forget about that. Thanks.